Bullies stole her wheelchair every day. Then one human boy carried the alien girl to class. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The hallways of Galactic Preparatory Academy echoed with the sound of hundreds of students rushing to their morning classes. Among them, barely visible in the chaotic rush, was Nima, a frail Centaurian girl whose delicate blue skin seemed almost translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights. Nima clutched her datapad tightly against her chest as she propelled her wheelchair forward with trembling hands. Her large, almond-shaped eyes darted nervously from side to side, scanning the corridor for the familiar faces that made each school day a living nightmare. The gravity on Earth was nearly double that of her home planet, making every movement a strenuous effort for her fragile physique. The specialized wheelchair, calibrated with gravity compensators, was her lifeline in this alien world. The first Centaurian to attend the prestigious academy, Nima was the reluctant pioneer of an interplanetary exchange program designed to foster understanding between Earth and the newly discovered civilizations beyond the solar system. But understanding was in short supply among the teenage population of the academy. As if on cue, three human boys emerged from around the corner. Their leader, Darius Wells, a tall senior with broad shoulders and a permanent smirk, nudged his companions. Darius was the son of a high-ranking Earth diplomat, which gave him an untouchable status at school. His father had been vocal about his opposition to what he called the alien infiltration of Earth's educational system. "Well, look who it is," Darius drawled, stepping directly into Nima's path. "If it isn't our favorite little blue freak." Nima lowered her gaze, her four-fingered hands gripping the wheels of her chair tightly. "Please, I just want to get to class," she said, her voice barely audible. The translator device around her neck converted her native clicking language into human English, but it couldn't mask the fear in her tone. "Oh, of course," Darius said with exaggerated politeness. "But first, I think we need to check if this fancy chair of yours is up to Earth's safety standards." He exchanged knowing glances with his friends, who moved to flank Nima's wheelchair. In one swift motion, Darius grabbed the handles of her wheelchair and tilted it backward. Nima cried out, her datapad clattering to the floor as she desperately clutched at the armrests. "Looks like it fails the inspection," Darius announced. "We'll have to confiscate it. For your safety, of course." His friends laughed as they began to will Nima away from her chair. "Please no," Nima pleaded, her translator device crackling with the intensity of her distress. "I cannot move without it." Darius lifted her effortlessly from the chair, setting her down roughly against the wall. "Then I guess you won't be moving today," he said coldly, as his friends wheeled her chair away, disappearing around a corner. Nima sat helplessly on the floor, her thin legs useless under Earth's crushing gravity. Tears welled in her eyes, but remained suspended there. Centaurians did not cry like humans. Instead, their tears collected in their eyes, magnifying their already large irises, giving them a glassy, almost doll-like appearance. Students passed by, some averting their eyes, others staring openly, but none stopping to help. This was not the first time, nor would it be the last. Each day, Darius and his gang would find her, take her wheelchair, and hide it somewhere in the school's sprawling campus. Sometimes a teacher would eventually find it and return it to her. Other times, she would spend hours searching for it after school, dragging herself painfully from room to room. The warning bell rang, signaling that classes would begin in 5 minutes. Nima looked down at her datapad, its screen now cracked from the fall. She was going to be late for advanced xenobiology again. Professor Martinez had been understanding the first few times, but his patience was wearing thin. One more tardy mark, and she would be placed on academic probation, potentially jeopardizing the entire exchange program. She attempted to pull herself up using the wall for support, but her muscles strained against the relentless pull of Earth's gravity. Her breathing became labored as she exerted herself, and spots danced before her eyes. It was no use. Without her chair, she was completely stranded. The hallways had emptied now, the last few stragglers rushing to their classrooms. Nima resigned herself to another day of humiliation and failure. She would have to wait for a faculty member to find her, which could take hours, as this particular corridor was rarely used during first period. Just as she was about to give up hope, a pair of worn sneakers appeared in her downcast field of vision. Nema tensed, expecting more torment, perhaps from one of Darius's many admirers who were eager to prove their loyalty to the popular clique. "Hey, are you okay?" a male voice asked, genuine concern evident in his tone. Nema looked up slowly to see a human boy she didn't recognize. He was tall and lanky, with unruly brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore the standard academy uniform, but his tie was loose, and his blazer was nowhere to be seen. "They took my wheelchair," Nema explained softly, her translator converting her clicks into a melodic English that still retained an alien cadence. "I cannot get to class." The boy frowned, glancing down the now empty hallway. "That's Darius and his goons, isn't it? They do this a lot." Nema nodded, surprised that this stranger seemed to understand the situation immediately. "Every day," she admitted. "Different times, different places. Today they were early." The boy's expression hardened momentarily before softening as he looked back at her. "What class do you have now?" "Advanced Xenobiology with Professor Martinez," Nema replied. "But it is fine. I will wait for someone from administration to find me. They usually do, eventually." The boy checked his watch and shook his head. "That's on the 3rd floor, and class starts in 3 minutes." He seemed to make a decision, setting down his backpack and kneeling beside her. "I'm Ethan, by the way. Ethan Cole." "I am Nema," she responded, her translator lagging slightly on the pronunciation of her name, which contained sounds no human could naturally produce. "Well, Nema," Ethan said with a determined smile, "I can't find your wheelchair in the next 3 minutes, but I can get you to class. If that's okay with you." Before Nema could respond, Ethan had gently scooped her up in his arms. She was startled by the contact. Centaurians were not a physically demonstrative species, and touch between non-family members was rare. But she was even more surprised by how easy it seemed for him to lift her. Her species was naturally lighter than humans due to their homeworld's lower gravity. But on Earth, with the gravity compensators in her wheelchair offline, she felt the full burden of her weight. "Is this all right?" Ethan asked, clearly noticing her discomfort. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I figured it's better than missing class." Nema hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, this is acceptable. Thank you, Ethan Cole." "Just Ethan is fine," he said with a smile, beginning to walk briskly toward the stairwell, carrying her as if she weighed nothing at all. "I'm new here. Just transferred in last week. Guess I haven't had the pleasure of meeting the local welcoming committee yet," he added sarcastically. As Ethan carried her up the stairs, Nema became acutely aware of the strangeness of her situation. No one on her world would ever carry another person this way, except perhaps in the most dire medical emergencies. Yet here was this human boy, a complete stranger, carrying her through the school as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Why are you helping me?" Nema asked suddenly, her translator making the question sound more accusatory than she'd intended. Ethan didn't break stride as he replied, "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I know what it's like to be the new kid." He glanced down at her with a half-smile. "Though I guess you've got me beat on the new scale, being from another planet and all." They reached the 3rd floor, and Ethan continued down the hallway, still carrying Nema effortlessly. Students who had lingered outside their classrooms stared openly at the sight of a human boy carrying a Centaurian girl. Whispers followed them like a wave. "You do not have to do this," Nema said quietly, embarrassment coloring her words. "People will talk." "Let them," Ethan replied simply. "Besides, we're almost there." True to his word, they reached Professor Martinez's classroom just as the final bell rang. Ethan pushed the door open with his back, turning sideways to maneuver through the doorway without bumping Nema's head or feet. The classroom fell silent as every head turned to stare at them. Professor Martinez, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and perpetually rolled-up sleeves, paused mid-sentence, his eyebrows rising toward his hairline. "Miss Nema," he said after a moment, "I see you found an alternative mode of transportation today." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the classroom, quickly silenced by a sharp look from the professor. "Her wheelchair was stolen, sir," Ethan explained, his voice clear and steady despite the attention now focused on him. "I found her stranded in the east hallway." Professor Martinez's expression darkened. I see. And you are? Ethan Cole, sir. I'm new. Well, Mr. Cole, while I appreciate your gallantry, I don't believe you're enrolled in this class. No, sir. I have world history with Miss Patel. Which began, Professor Martinez checked his watch, approximately 45 seconds ago. I suggest you make haste. Ethan nodded and carefully set Nima down in an empty seat at the front of the class. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her discreetly. That's my schedule, he whispered, in case you need a lift between classes. Before Nima could thank him, he was gone, jogging out the door and down the hall toward his own class. Professor Martinez cleared his throat. Now that our morning entertainment is concluded, shall we return to the fascinating world of extraterrestrial microbiology? As the professor resumed his lecture, Nima found herself unable to concentrate. She kept unfolding and refolding Ethan's schedule, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time since arriving on Earth 3 months ago, someone had seen her not as a curiosity or a burden, but simply as a person who needed help. She glanced down at the schedule in her hands, noting that Ethan's next class was just down the hall from hers. Perhaps, she thought cautiously, this day would not be like all the others after all. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. After advanced xenobiology ended, Nima found Ethan waiting for her outside the classroom, leaning casually against the wall as if they had planned to meet all along. Need a lift? He asked with a grin, seemingly oblivious to the stares and whispers of passing students. Throughout the day, Ethan carried Nima from class to class. Between periods, he would appear at her classroom door, scoop her up without hesitation, and deliver her to her next lesson. By lunchtime, the entire school was buzzing with gossip about the new human boy and the alien girl. In the cafeteria, Ethan set Nima down at an empty table before heading to the lunch line. She watched nervously as he loaded a tray with enough food for both of them, keenly aware of the hundreds of eyes tracking his movements. When he returned and sat beside her, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, the whispers intensified. You do not have to eat with me, Nima said softly. I understand if you would prefer to sit with other humans. Ethan shrugged, pushing a container of specially prepared Centaurian-compatible food toward her. I like sitting with you, unless you'd rather eat alone. No, Nima admitted, her large eyes reflecting the harsh cafeteria lights. I have eaten alone every day since I arrived. Ethan frowned at this, but said nothing, instead opening his milk carton and taking a long sip. After a moment, he spoke again. So, tell me about Centauri. What's it like there? For the first time in months, Nima felt a flutter of excitement. No one at the academy had ever asked her about her home. They had studied Centaurian physiology and culture in their classes, treating her people like specimens rather than individuals with a rich history and civilization. It is beautiful, she began haltingly, unsure how to convey the majesty of her world in simple English terms. The sky is always purple, even during daylight, and there are 3 moons, all different colors. As Nima described the floating cities of Centauri, the annual migration festival where her people gathered to commemorate their ancestors' journey across the stars, and the bioluminescent forests that lit up the night, she began to relax. Ethan listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than morbid curiosity. It sounds amazing, he said when she finally paused for breath. No wonder Earth must seem so dull to you. Nima tilted her head, considering this. Earth is not dull, she countered. It is intense. Everything here is heavier, brighter, louder. Your emotions especially. Humans feel everything so strongly and show it so openly. On Centauri, we are more contained. Ethan laughed. Yeah, I guess we are a pretty dramatic bunch. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of Darius and his friends at their table. The cafeteria quieted as students turned to watch the confrontation that had been brewing since morning. Well, if it isn't the alien lover, Darius sneered, looming over Ethan. Didn't take you long to find the biggest freak in school to cozy up to. Ethan continued eating, seemingly unperturbed by the interruption. Is there something you needed, or are you just here to practice your weak insults? Darius's face flushed with anger. You think you're tough, new kid? You don't know who you're messing with. Actually, I do. Ethan replied calmly, finally looking up. You're Darius Wells. Your dad's some kind of diplomat, which you think gives you the right to be a complete jerk to everyone. And you've been stealing Nima's wheelchair because you're too much of a coward to pick on someone who can fight back. A collective gasp went through the cafeteria. No one spoke to Darius that way, especially not a new student with no social standing. Darius leaned down, his face inches from Ethan's. You're dead, Cole. You hear me? Dead. That seems medically impossible at the moment, Ethan replied with a small smile. But I appreciate your concern for my well-being. Darius straightened, his jaw clenched in fury. He turned his gaze to Nima, who shrank back instinctively. As for you, alien, he spat, you can tell your new boyfriend that his little hero act won't last. Nobody wants you here. Not the students, not the teachers, and especially not my father and the other board members who matter. You're a diplomatic experiment that's already failed. Before Ethan could respond, a sharp voice cut through the tension. Mr. Wells. Principal Chun stood at the entrance to the cafeteria, her arms crossed and her expression thunderous. My office. Now. Darius hesitated, clearly weighing his options, before shooting one last venomous glare at Ethan and Nima. This isn't over, he muttered, before turning to join Principal Chun at the door. As they left, the cafeteria erupted in excited chatter. Nima looked at Ethan with wide, worried eyes. You should not have done that, she said. Darius is dangerous. His father has connections to the diplomatic corps and the school board. He can make trouble for you. Ethan shrugged. I'm not worried about Darius or his dad. But why risk it? You barely know me. Ethan was quiet for a moment, absently stirring his mashed potatoes. When I was 8, he finally said, my family moved to a new town. I was small for my age and had these huge glasses. The kids at school made my life miserable. Every day, they'd take my backpack, or my lunch, or my books. One day, they took my glasses and stomped on them. I couldn't see a thing without them, so I just sat there in the playground, alone and blind, until a teacher finally found me. He looked up at Nima, his eyes serious behind those same wire-rimmed glasses. No one should feel that helpless. Ever. Not on Earth, not on Centauri, not anywhere in the galaxy. Nima felt that strange warmth in her chest again, spreading outward until her fingertips tingled with it. She didn't have the words to respond, so she simply nodded, hoping Ethan understood what she couldn't express. The afternoon classes passed in much the same way as the morning, with Ethan ferrying Nima from room to room in his arms. By the last period, the stares had lessened somewhat, as the novelty of the situation began to wear off. A few students even smiled or nodded at them as they passed in the hallways. After the final bell rang, Ethan carried Nima to the administration office, where they filed a formal report about her missing wheelchair. The secretary, Mrs. Garvey, a kindly woman with a perpetual look of mild confusion, promised to have security search for it immediately. This is becoming a serious problem, Mrs. Garvey said with a frown. I'm going to make sure Principal Chun knows the full extent of what's been happening. As they left the office, Nima directed Ethan to her locker. I need to get my things for the journey home, she explained. Where do you live? Ethan asked, carefully setting her down so she could reach her locker. Ambassador Wells was a tall, imposing figure with the same sharp features as his son, though his were hardened by years of political maneuvering. He wore an impeccable suit with the insignia of the Earth Diplomatic Corps prominently displayed on his lapel. Miss Nima, Principal Chun called as they approached. We need to speak with you. Ethan instinctively moved closer to Nima, as if preparing to shield her from whatever was coming. We've reviewed the security footage from this morning, Principal Chun continued when they reached the pair. It clearly shows Darius Wells and 2 other students taking your wheelchair. Ambassador Wells stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. My son has admitted to his involvement in this prank. He assures me it was meant as nothing more than a harmless joke, but he understands that his actions were inappropriate. Ethan made a disbelieving noise, which he quickly disguised as a cough, when Principal Chin shot him a warning look. The wheelchair has been located in the boys' locker room, one of the security officers reported. It appears to be undamaged. Relief washed over Nima, though it was tempered by the presence of Ambassador Wells. She had encountered him several times at diplomatic functions and had always sensed his barely concealed disdain for non-human species. "I want to assure you," Ambassador Wells continued, addressing Nema directly for the first time, "that Darius will face appropriate consequences for his actions. The Earth Diplomatic Corps takes our interspecies relations very seriously, and this incident does not reflect our values." His words were perfect, his tone reasonable, but his eyes were cold and calculating. This was damage control, nothing more. "Thank you, Ambassador," Nema replied formally, her translator rendering her words in the diplomatic dialect it had been programmed to use with officials. "I appreciate your concern." The security officers returned moments later with Nema's wheelchair. She felt a rush of emotion at the sight of it, relief, gratitude, and a strange hint of disappointment. With her chair returned, she would no longer need Ethan to carry her. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan stepped forward to take the wheelchair from the officers. He checked it over carefully, testing the gravity compensators and making sure the controls were responsive before positioning it next to Nema. "All systems operational," he announced with a smile, helping her into the familiar seat. "Good as new." Principal Chen nodded approvingly. "Mr. Cole, your assistance to Miss Nema today has been noted and appreciated. However, in the future, please report such incidents to faculty immediately rather than taking matters into your own hands." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied, though Nema noted he didn't actually promise to do so. Ambassador Wells cleared his throat. "If that's all, Principal Chen, I have a diplomatic function to attend this evening." "Of course, Ambassador. Thank you for coming in to address this matter personally." As the adults began to move away, Ambassador Wells paused beside Ethan. "Young man," he said quietly, his voice pitched so that only Ethan and Nema could hear, "a word of advice. Being seen as too friendly with extraterrestrials can complicate one's future prospects, especially if one has ambitions in certain fields. Something to consider." Without waiting for a response, he strode away, leaving a chill in his wake. Ethan stared after him, his expression unreadable. "What a piece of work," he muttered once the ambassador was out of earshot. "Guess the jerk apple doesn't fall far from the jerk tree." Nema adjusted her position in her wheelchair, feeling the blessed relief of the gravity compensators taking effect. "Ambassador Wells has significant influence," she warned. "You should heed his words." Ethan snorted. "Yeah, I don't think I will." He picked up his backpack, slinging it over one shoulder. "So, need a ride to the transport area?" Nema hesitated. Part of her wanted to assert her independence now that she had her mobility back. But another part, a stronger part, didn't want this day with Ethan to end. Yes, she decided. That would be nice. They made their way through the now empty hallways, Nema propelling her wheelchair while Ethan walked beside her. The silence between them was comfortable, yet charged with unspoken thoughts. As they reached the transport area, Nema spotted the diplomatic shuttle waiting for her. The driver, a stoic man who never spoke beyond basic greetings, stood by the specialized ramp that would allow her wheelchair access to the vehicle. "Well," Ethan said, stopping at the edge of the pickup zone, "I guess this is where we part ways." Nema turned to face him, suddenly finding it difficult to meet his eyes. "Yes, thank you for your assistance today. It was most helpful." Ethan laughed softly. "You're welcome. Though I have to say, as far as thank yous go, that was pretty formal." Nema felt her skin flush, turning a deeper shade of blue. Centaurians were not skilled at casual conversation, particularly with other species. All her diplomatic training had prepared her for formal interactions, not whatever this was. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not always understand human communication patterns." "No, don't apologize," Ethan said quickly. "I was just teasing. It's what friends do." Nema looked up sharply at the word friends. "We are friends." "Well, yeah," Ethan replied, as if it were obvious. "I mean, I carried you around all day, we had lunch together, we faced down the evil ambassador together. That's friendship in my book." A flutter of something unfamiliar and pleasant stirred in Nema's chest. "I would like that," she said softly. "I have not had a friend on Earth before." Ethan's expression softened. "Well, you do now." He glanced at his watch and winced. "I should go? My mom's waiting to pick me up on the other side of campus." "Yes, of course," Nema said, trying to hide her disappointment. "I will see you tomorrow?" "Definitely." Ethan confirmed with a grin. Though hopefully I won't have to carry you around this time. He gave her a mock salute before turning to jog across the campus, disappearing around a corner. Nima watched him go, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her. She had come to Earth as a diplomatic pioneer, expecting to endure her time here in isolated misery. Never had she anticipated finding a human who would look past her alien appearance and treat her simply as a person. As she boarded the shuttle and secured her wheelchair in the designated space, Nima allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps, she thought, there was hope for interspecies relations after all, not through formal treaties or exchange programs, but through simple acts of kindness between individuals. The diplomatic shuttle pulled away from the academy, and Nima gazed out the window at the passing human city. For the first time since her arrival on this strange, heavy world, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning, Nima arrived at school with a nervous flutter in her stomach. Part of her feared that yesterday had been an anomaly, that Ethan would have reconsidered his friendship with her overnight. After all, Ambassador Wells's warning had been clear. Association with her could damage Ethan's future prospects. The diplomatic shuttle dropped her off at the accessibility entrance, and she navigated her wheelchair through the mostly empty hallways. She had deliberately arrived early, hoping to avoid any potential confrontation with Darius and his friends before classes began. As she rounded the corner to her locker, a familiar figure came into view. Ethan was leaning against her locker, a paper bag in one hand and 2 cups balanced precariously in the other. When he spotted her, his face lit up with a smile that immediately dispelled her fears. "Morning," he called cheerfully. "I brought breakfast. I wasn't sure what you could eat, so I got a bunch of different things." Nima approached, unable to keep a smile from spreading across her own face. "Good morning, Ethan. You did not need to do that." Ethan shrugged. "Wanted to. Besides, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, or so my mom keeps telling me." He handed her one of the cups. "It's just water. I figured that was a safe bet." "Water is perfect," Nima assured him, taking the cup gratefully. Water was one of the few Earth substances completely compatible with Centaurian physiology. As they shared the breakfast Ethan had brought, Nima carefully selecting items her digestive system could process, other students began to filter into the hallways. Unlike yesterday, when stares and whispers had followed them everywhere, today they received only curious glances, as if their friendship was already becoming old news. "So, did you finish the calculus homework?" Ethan asked between bites of his apple. "I got stuck on the last problem." Nima nodded, reaching into her bag for her datapad. "Yes, I can show you my approach. The key is to recognize that the function is a variant of the standard Centaurian orbital calculation, just expressed in Earth mathematical terms." Ethan blinked. "What now?" "Oh," Nima said, realizing her mistake. "I forgot that you do not learn interplanetary mathematics in your standard curriculum. It is a type of equation we use to calculate the gravitational interactions between celestial bodies. And that helps with calculus. How exactly?" Ethan asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. As Nima explained, drawing diagrams on her datapad to illustrate the concepts, she was struck by how natural this felt. Sharing knowledge, helping each other, these were universal constants that transcended species and planets. The warning bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until first period. Ethan helped Nima pack up her things before they headed to their respective classes, promising to meet at their usual spot for lunch. The morning passed uneventfully. Nima found herself paying more attention in her classes, taking detailed notes not just for herself, but also with the thought of sharing interesting tidbits with Ethan later. In comparative literature, when Ms. Patterson discussed human poetry, Nima found herself wondering what Ethan would think of Centaurian verse, with its complex patterns based on mathematical sequences. At lunch, she shared her musings with him, and was delighted when he asked her to recite some Centaurian poetry. She did so, the translator rendering the clicks and trills into an approximation of the meaning, though much of the beauty was lost in translation. "That's amazing," Ethan said when she finished. "It sounds like music and mathematics combined." "That is a very apt description," Nima replied, pleased by his understanding. Centaurian art forms often integrate multiple disciplines. We do not separate science from art as distinctly as humans do. That makes sense, Ethan nodded. I've always thought the boundaries were kind of arbitrary anyway. Like, why can't math be beautiful? Why can't art be logical? Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by the arrival of a group of students at their table. Nima tensed automatically, expecting hostility, but was surprised to recognize them as members of the Academy's science club. Hey, said a girl with short, purple-tipped hair whom Nima knew as Madison Grant. You're in my advanced xenobiology class, right? I'm Maddie. Yes, Nima confirmed cautiously. I am Nima. We know, said another student, a tall boy with a shock of red hair. You're kind of famous around here. The only Centaurian at the Academy. We were wondering, Maddie continued, seemingly oblivious to Nima's discomfort. If you'd be interested in coming to our science club meeting after school today? We're discussing interspecies medical compatibility, and we thought, well, you might have some insights. Nima was momentarily speechless. In her 3 months at the Academy, this was the first time any student had invited her to participate in an extracurricular activity. Ethan, noticing her hesitation, jumped in. That sounds cool. What time is the meeting? 3:30 in the lab, Maddie replied. You can come too, if you want. We're always looking for new members. I would like that, Nima finally said, finding her voice. Thank you for the invitation. After the science club members left, Nima turned to Ethan with wide eyes. That was unexpected. Ethan grinned. Not really. You're brilliant, and they're science nerds. It's a natural fit. But why now? They have known of my existence for 3 months. Ethan considered this, tapping his fork thoughtfully against his tray. Sometimes people need to see someone else take the first step before they're brave enough to follow. They probably wanted to talk to you before, but weren't sure how. Nima wasn't entirely convinced, but she appreciated Ethan's perspective. Will you really come to the meeting as well? Sure, Ethan said. I'm not exactly a science whiz, but I'm curious. Plus, I want to hear more about this interspecies medical stuff. Might come in handy if you ever need a doctor here on Earth. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and casual interactions. Nima noticed a subtle shift in how people were treating her. Students who had previously ignored her existence now nodded in greeting when she passed them in the hallways. A girl in her Earth history class asked to borrow a stylus and actually thanked her when Nima provided one. Small things, insignificant in isolation, but together they represented a sea change in her daily experience at the Academy. After their last class, Ethan met Nima outside her classroom as promised, and they made their way to the science lab together. Nima felt a nervous excitement building within her. This would be her first real opportunity to engage with human students in an academic setting where her Centaurian knowledge might actually be valued rather than viewed as alien or strange. The lab was already filled with about 15 students when they arrived. Maddie waved them over to 2 empty seats she had saved near the front. As they settled in, Nima was acutely aware of the curious gazes directed her way, but for once, they didn't feel hostile or judgmental, merely interested. Welcome, everyone, began Professor Chun, the faculty advisor for the science club and no relation to Principal Chun. Today we have a special guest joining us. Nima is the first Centaurian student to attend our academy, and she has graciously agreed to share some insights on interspecies medical compatibility. All eyes turned to Nima, who felt a momentary panic. No one had mentioned she would be expected to speak. She glanced at Ethan, who gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Nima moved her wheelchair to the front of the room. Thank you for inviting me, she began, her translator converting her nervous clicks into steady English. I should clarify that I am not a medical expert, but I have received extensive briefings on Centaurian-human medical interactions as part of my preparation for the exchange program. For the next 20 minutes, Nima explained the basics of Centaurian physiology, their copper-based blood that appeared green rather than red, their triple-lobed brain structure, their more efficient respiratory system that had evolved in the thinner atmosphere of Centauri. She described the challenges of living on Earth, from the higher gravity that necessitated her specialized wheelchair to the different atmospheric composition that sometimes made breathing difficult. The students listened with rapt attention, asking thoughtful questions that Nima did her best to answer. When she mentioned the specialized diet she had to maintain on Earth, avoiding certain proteins that were toxic to Centaurians, Maddie immediately began taking notes. So, If a Centaurian needed emergency medical treatment on Earth, asked the red-haired boy, whose name Nima had learned was Riley Cooper, what would be the most important things for human doctors to know? Never use iron-based medications, Nima replied without hesitation. They would bond with our copper-based blood cells and cause immediate cellular breakdown. Also, our pain receptors are concentrated differently than yours. A Centaurian might not show traditional signs of distress even when seriously injured. The discussion continued, evolving from purely medical topics to broader questions about Centaurian culture and society. Nima found herself speaking more openly than she ever had before, sharing details about her homeworld that went beyond the dry facts presented in the Academy's textbooks. When the meeting finally ended, several students lingered, continuing to chat with Nima and Ethan. Maddie invited them to join the group for pizza afterward, a weekly tradition following science club meetings. I cannot consume most Earth pizzas, Nima explained regretfully. But you should go, Ethan. I will take the diplomatic shuttle home. Actually, Professor Chin interjected, overhearing their conversation. There's a new place downtown that specializes in interspecies cuisine. They have Centaurian-compatible options. The faculty tried it during our last diversity training session. Ethan's face lit up. Problem solved. What do you say, Nima? Up for some alien pizza. The thought of going into the city, to a restaurant, with a group of human teenagers was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was so far outside Nima's carefully controlled routine that she almost refused automatically. But something, perhaps the excitement in Ethan's eyes, or the friendly expectation in Maddie's smile, made her reconsider. I would like that, she decided. But I will need to inform my diplomatic handler. Great, Maddie exclaimed. We'll wait for you outside while you make the call. As the other students filed out, Nima contacted her handler, a stern woman from the diplomatic corps who monitored her activities on Earth. To Nima's surprise, permission was granted with minimal questioning. Perhaps the officials were pleased that she was finally engaging in social activities with humans, fulfilling the cultural exchange aspect of her mission that had been sorely lacking until now. The trip to the restaurant was an adventure in itself. The group took public transportation, requiring special accommodations for Nima's wheelchair. The other students handled the logistics seamlessly, with Riley and another boy named Tyler Grant physically lifting her wheelchair onto the bus when the accessibility ramp malfunctioned. Throughout the evening, Nima observed the easy camaraderie of the human teenagers, the way they teased each other good-naturedly, their rapid-fire references to shared cultural touchstones, their casual physical contact, a hand on a shoulder here, a playful shove there. It was a form of social interaction entirely foreign to Centaurians, whose interpersonal relationships were governed by strict protocols and formal rituals. Yet there was something appealing about the human way, a warmth and spontaneity that Centaurian interactions often lacked. When Maddie casually complimented Nima's intricate braided hairstyle, a traditional Centaurian style that no human had ever remarked upon before, Nima felt a surge of pleasure that seemed disproportionate to the simple comment. The restaurant, as promised, offered several Centaurian-compatible dishes. Nima selected a flatbread topped with vegetables grown in specialized hydroponic farms that catered to non-human nutritional needs. It wasn't quite pizza as the humans understood it, but it was close enough that she felt included in the shared experience. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic: school gossip, upcoming exams, the latest developments in interplanetary politics, and the eternal question of whether the cafeteria's mystery meat was actually meat at all. So, Ethan, Riley said during a lull in the conversation, you're new too, right? Where'd you transfer from? Military base in Europe, Ethan replied, taking a sip of his soda. My dad's in the aerospace division. We move around a lot. That must be tough, Maddie said sympathetically. Always being the new kid. Ethan shrugged. You get used to it. Though this is the first school where I've met someone from another planet, so that's definitely new. Everyone laughed, including Nima, whose translator rendered her Centaurian chirps of amusement into a melodic sound that made several heads turn at nearby tables. What about you, Nima? Tyler asked. What made you want to come to Earth for school? I mean, our planet must seem pretty primitive compared to Centauri. Nima considered her answer carefully. The diplomatic response would be to praise Earth's educational system and express gratitude for the opportunity. But surrounded by these humans who had welcomed her so openly, she felt a desire to share the truth. "I did not choose to come here," she admitted. "I was selected by my government because of my family's diplomatic status and my academic record. It was considered an honor, but—" She hesitated, unsure how to express the complex mix of duty and resentment she had felt. "But you didn't want to leave home," Ethan finished for her, his voice gentle with understanding. Nima nodded. "Yes. Centaurians rarely travel off-world. Our physiology makes it difficult and sometimes dangerous. My parents were concerned, but the diplomatic opportunity was too significant to decline." "Do you miss it?" Maddie asked. "Your home, I mean." "Every day," Nima replied simply. "Earth is fascinating, and I have learned much here. But Centauri is home." A silence fell over the table, not uncomfortable but thoughtful, as the human students contemplated what it would be like to be sent alone to an alien world at their age. "Well," Riley finally said, raising his glass, "here's to Nima, the bravest exchange student in the galaxy." The others raised their glasses in a human ritual that Nima recognized from her cultural briefings. She lifted her own water glass, touched by the gesture. "And to new friends," Ethan added, his eyes meeting Nima's with a warmth that made her forget, for a moment, how far she was from home. The evening ended too soon, with the group dispersing to catch various transports home. Ethan insisted on accompanying Nima to the diplomatic shuttle pickup point, despite it being in the opposite direction from his own home. "Today was unexpected," Nima said as they waited for her shuttle. "Thank you for encouraging me to go." "No need to thank me," Ethan replied, leaning against a signpost. "Did you have fun?" Nima considered the question. Fun was not a concept Centaurians typically applied to social gatherings, which were viewed more as obligations or opportunities for knowledge exchange. But the warm feeling in her chest, the lingering smile on her face, these seemed to align with the human concept of enjoyment. "Yes," she decided. "I had fun." Ethan's grin widened. "Good. That's the point of hanging out with friends, you know? To have fun." "Friends," Nima repeated, testing the word. "I have human friends now." "You definitely do," Ethan confirmed. "Maddie's already planning to invite you to her birthday party next month." Before Nima could respond, the diplomatic shuttle appeared around the corner. As it pulled up to the curb, Ethan helped her maneuver her wheelchair into position for boarding. "See you tomorrow?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes," Nima replied. "Tomorrow." As the shuttle pulled away, Nima watched Ethan's figure grow smaller in the distance, his hand raised in farewell. A strange sensation settled over her, a mixture of contentment and something else she couldn't quite identify. It took her most of the journey home to recognize it as belonging. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Nima felt like she might have found a place where she fit, not despite her differences, but with them acknowledged and accepted. It wasn't Centauri, and it never would be. But perhaps, she thought as the shuttle approached the diplomatic compound, it could be something equally valuable, a second home. The next few weeks brought changes to Nima's life that she could never have anticipated. The science club became a regular part of her schedule, with meetings twice a week and occasional weekend outings to museums or scientific exhibitions. Maddie, Riley, Tyler, and several other club members formed a loose social circle that gradually expanded to include Nima and, by extension, Ethan. More surprising was the shift in the general school population's attitude toward her. The overt bullying ceased entirely after the wheelchair incident with Darius, who had been suspended for 3 days and returned to school noticeably subdued. While not everyone was friendly, the active hostility that had defined Nima's first months at the academy had largely dissipated. Ethan theorized that by standing up to Darius, they had broken some sort of social spell. He only had power because everyone was afraid to challenge him. He explained one day as they studied in the library. Once someone did, it showed that he wasn't untouchable after all. Nima wasn't entirely convinced that human social dynamics could be so simply explained, but she couldn't deny the evidence of her own experience. Students who had previously ignored her now greeted her in the hallways. Teachers who had seemed uncertain how to interact with her now called on her in class with the same frequency as human students. Even the school administration seemed to have awakened to her presence. Principal Chun had called Nima to her office to discuss potential accommodations that might make her academy experience more comfortable. The result was a series of small but meaningful changes. A designated rest area where she could adjust her gravity compensators during long school days. Modified physical education requirements that took into account her physiological limitations, and most significantly, an amendment to the school's anti-bullying policy to explicitly include species-based harassment. Ethan had become a constant in Nima's life, a steady presence that she found herself relying on in ways both practical and emotional. They studied together most afternoons, either in the library or at Ethan's home, where his mother, a warm, energetic woman who worked as an engineer, had taken an immediate liking to Nima. "You're the first of Ethan's friends who can keep up with him intellectually," Mrs. Cole had confided during one of Nima's visits, as they watched Ethan struggle through a particularly challenging calculus problem that Nima had solved 20 minutes earlier. "It's good for him to have some academic competition." Nima had been unsure how to respond to this. Competition was not valued in Centaurian education, which emphasized collaborative learning and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake rather than for personal advancement. But she was coming to understand that humans often viewed friendly rivalry as a form of connection rather than conflict. It was during one of these study sessions at the Cole residence, nearly a month after the wheelchair incident, that Nima received an unexpected communication from the diplomatic corps. She was reviewing historical documents on her datapad when a priority alert flashed across the screen. "Is everything okay?" Ethan asked, noticing her sudden stillness. Nima read the message twice before responding. "I am not sure," she said slowly. "The diplomatic corps is requesting my presence at a formal reception tomorrow evening. It is unusual. I am not typically included in such functions." "Maybe they finally realized what an awesome ambassador you are," Ethan suggested with a grin. Who better to represent Centauri than the girl who's single-handedly improving interspecies relations at Galactica Prep? Nima tilted her head, considering this possibility. It was true that her initial mission, to serve as a living example of successful integration, had been progressing more smoothly in recent weeks. Perhaps the diplomatic officials had noticed and wished to acknowledge her efforts. Perhaps, she agreed cautiously, though the timing is curious. The Galactic Council is currently debating an expansion of the exchange program. My parents mentioned it in their last communication. Ethan's expression turned serious. "You think this is political? Using you as a success story to push the expansion?" Sometimes Nima was startled by Ethan's perceptiveness. For all his casual demeanor and seeming disinterest in politics, he had a knack for cutting to the heart of complex situations. "It is a possibility," she acknowledged. "The message indicates that several high-ranking officials will be present, including representatives from other worlds considering joining the exchange." And she hesitated, rereading a particular line. "And," Ethan prompted, "Ambassador Wells will be hosting the event." Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "Darius's dad? The guy who basically threatened me for being friends with you? That Ambassador Wells?" Nima nodded, a sense of unease settling over her. "Yes, which makes the invitation even more perplexing. Ambassador Wells has never hidden his reservations about the exchange program." "Sounds like a trap to me," Ethan said, frowning. "Why would a guy who clearly doesn't like non-humans suddenly want to show you off at a fancy diplomatic party?" It was a valid question, and one that troubled Nima as she prepared for the reception the following evening. The diplomatic handlers who supervised her Earth stay were uncharacteristically tight-lipped about the purpose of the event, saying only that she was expected to attend and to present herself as a positive example of Centaurian youth. The reception was held at the Earth Diplomatic Corps headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the heart of the city. Nima arrived in her formal attire, a flowing garment of iridescent fabric that shifted colors with her movements, a traditional Centaurian design modified to accommodate Earth gravity and her wheelchair. The grand ballroom was already filled with dignitaries from various worlds when she entered, escorted by her handler. Nima recognized representatives from Proxima, Tau Ceti, and even a delegation from the distant Eridani system, whose people rarely ventured beyond their own stars. What she didn't see, at first, were any other exchange students. The gathering appeared to be exclusively adult diplomats and officials, making Nima's presence all the more conspicuous. Her handler guided her through the crowd, introducing her to various dignitaries who expressed polite interest in her Earth experiences. Nima answered their questions with the diplomatic precision she had been trained in since childhood, highlighting the positive aspects of her stay while gracefully sidestepping the challenges. It was exhausting work, maintaining this careful balance between truth and diplomacy. By the time she encountered the Eridani delegation, Nima was beginning to feel the strain of Earth's gravity despite her wheelchair's compensators. "Ah, the young Centaurian pioneer," said the lead Eridani representative, a tall, willowy being with silver-gray skin and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "We have heard much about your experiences at the Human Educational Facility." Something in the Eridani's tone made Nima wary. "I hope the reports have been informative," she replied neutrally. "Oh, quite," the Eridani said, its voice a soft whisper that nonetheless carried clearly. "Particularly the incidents of harassment. Most concerning for those of us considering sending our young ones to Earth." Before Nima could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. "I see you've met our Centaurian guest of honor." Ambassador Wells appeared at Nima's side, his diplomatic smile firmly in place. "Miss Nima has been a valuable addition to our academy. Despite some initial adjustment difficulties, which are to be expected in any cross-cultural exchange." The Eridani's expression remained unreadable, but a subtle shift in its posture suggested skepticism. "Indeed. Adjustment difficulties. Is that what humans call the systematic bullying your son inflicted on this child?" Ambassador Wells's smile didn't falter, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Isolated incidents, greatly exaggerated in the reporting. Children will be children, regardless of species. I'm sure your own young have their moments of conflict." "Our young," the Eridani replied coldly, "are taught respect for all sentient beings from their earliest awareness, a value that seems somewhat unevenly distributed among humans." With a slight inclination of its head that managed to convey both respect to Nima and dismissal to Ambassador Wells, the Eridani moved away to join another group. For a moment, Ambassador Wells stood motionless beside Nima, his diplomatic mask temporarily frozen. Then, with visible effort, he composed himself. "Miss Nima," he said, his voice lowered so only she could hear. "A word in private, if you please." It wasn't a request. Nima followed as he led her to a quiet alcove off the main ballroom, her unease growing with each meter. Once they were alone, Ambassador Wells dropped all pretense of cordiality. "What exactly have you been telling the other delegations about your experiences at the Academy?" he demanded. Nima straightened in her wheelchair, calling on her diplomatic training to keep her voice steady. "Nothing, Ambassador. This is the first interspecies gathering I have attended since beginning the exchange program." "Then how does the Eridani ambassador know about specific incidents involving my son?" "I do not know," Nima replied honestly. "Perhaps from official reports filed with the school administration?" The wheelchair incident was documented by security cameras and reported to the diplomatic corps. Ambassador Wells's expression darkened. "Let me be clear, Miss Nima. The expansion of the exchange program is a matter of significant political importance. Certain elements within the core believe that flooding our educational system with non-human students will benefit Earth. I disagree, and I will not have my political position undermined by exaggerated tales of teenage mischief." Nima felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Are you asking me to lie, Ambassador? To deny what happened?" "I'm asking you to understand the larger context," he replied. "Isolated incidents between students should not dictate interplanetary policy. When the Eridani or Proxima representatives question you about your experiences, I expect you to emphasize the positive aspects of your stay, the educational opportunities, the cultural exchange, the friendships you've formed." His tone made the last word sound like a distasteful concession. Before Nima could respond, a commotion from the main ballroom drew their attention. Raised voices, a crash of breaking glass, and then a familiar figure appeared in the alcove entrance. Ethan, dressed in what appeared to be his best attempt at formal attire, his tie askew and his hair more disheveled than usual. "There you are," he exclaimed, ignoring Ambassador Wells completely as he rushed to Nima's side. "I've been looking all over for you. Mr. Cole, Ambassador Wells said icily. This is a private diplomatic function. How exactly did you gain entry? Ethan flashed a badge that Nima recognized as belonging to his mother, who occasionally consulted for the Corps on engineering projects. My mom's credentials, he explained with unapologetic candor. She's home with the flu, so she won't be needing them tonight. Ambassador Wells's face flushed with anger. That's a serious security breach. I'll have to report this to. Oh, I wouldn't, Ethan interrupted, pulling out his phone. Because I recorded your little chat just now. Pressuring a minor diplomatic representative to lie about her experiences? That seems like the kind of thing the Galactic Council might find interesting. For a moment, Ambassador Wells seemed genuinely speechless. Then, with visible effort, he regained his composure. You're bluffing, he said, though without complete conviction. And even if you weren't, a recording obtained illegally would have no standing. Maybe not legally, Ethan agreed with a shrug. But politically? In the court of public opinion? I bet the news networks would love to hear how Earth's top diplomat tried to cover up his son's bullying of an alien exchange student. Great for interspecies relations, that. Ambassador Wells looked from Ethan to Nima, his expression calculating. What do you want? He finally asked. Nothing complicated, Ethan replied. Just let Nima tell her own story. No coaching, no pressure. If the exchange program succeeds or fails, let it be based on truth, not your political agenda. For a long moment, Ambassador Wells stood silent, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Very well. But remember, Miss Nima, that your words here tonight will have consequences far beyond your personal experiences. I hope you'll consider that responsibility carefully. With that, he turned and left the alcove, his back rigid with controlled fury. Once he was gone, Nima turned to Ethan with wide eyes. How did you know to come here? And did you really record our conversation? Ethan grinned, holding up his phone to show a blank screen. Nope. Total bluff. As for how I knew, your handler called our house looking for you. Apparently, you weren't answering your communicator, and they thought you might be with us. Mom mentioned the reception, and I had a bad feeling about it, especially when she said Ambassador Wells was hosting. Nima checked her communicator and found several missed alerts. She'd silenced it during the reception and forgotten to check it. That was extremely risky, she said, though she couldn't keep the admiration from her voice. Ambassador Wells could have had you arrested. Worth it, Ethan replied simply. I wasn't about to let him manipulate you into covering up what Darius did. A wave of gratitude washed over Nima, so intense it made her vision blur with unshed Centaurian tears. In that moment, she understood something profound about humans, or at least, about this particular human. Their capacity for loyalty, for putting friendship above personal risk or political consequence, was unlike anything in Centaurian culture, where duty to the collective good always superseded individual bonds. Thank you, she said softly, the words entirely inadequate for the emotion behind them. Ethan, seeming to sense her struggle, simply nodded. That's what friends do. Now, do you want to stay at this boring reception, or should we bail and get ice cream instead? The choice, put that way, was simple. Ice cream, Nima decided, already maneuvering her wheelchair toward the exit. But I cannot have dairy. They have plant-based options, Ethan assured her, falling into step beside her. And I checked, they're Centaurian safe. As they made their escape from the diplomatic reception, Nima reflected on the strange turn her life had taken since that day Ethan had found her stranded in the hallway. She had come to Earth expecting isolation and endurance. Instead, she had found connection and, improbably, joy. The reception faded into the background, its political machinations suddenly seeming less important than the simple pleasure of sharing ice cream with a friend who had crossed the city to stand beside her when she needed support most. Perhaps, Nima thought, this was the true essence of diplomacy after all, not formal receptions or carefully worded treaties, but the genuine bonds formed between individuals from different worlds. Later that evening, after Ethan had seen her safely back to the diplomatic housing complex, Nima received another communication, this one from her parents on Centauri. They had heard about the reception from their diplomatic contacts and wanted to ensure she was all right. Nima hesitated before responding. In her previous communications, she had downplayed the difficulties of her Earth stay, not wanting to worry them or give them reason to recall her from the program. But now, with the perspective gained from recent events, she felt ready to share a more complete picture, both the challenges and the unexpected joys. She composed a long message, describing Darius's bullying but also Ethan's intervention, the initial isolation but also the growing circle of friends she had found in the science club. She wrote about the physical strain of Earth's gravity, but also the exhilaration of experiencing a world so different from her own. And she included, with careful detail, Ambassador Wells's attempt to pressure her at the reception and Ethan's timely arrival. When she finally sent the message, Nima felt a sense of release. Whatever happened with the exchange program, whether it expanded as planned or was scaled back due to concerns about human attitudes toward non-humans, she had told her truth. Not the diplomatic version, not the politically expedient version, but the complex, messy, beautiful truth of her Earth experience. The next day at school, Nima arrived to find an unusual scene at the main entrance. A group of students was gathered around something she couldn't quite see, their voices raised in what sounded like protest. As she approached, the crowd parted slightly, and Nima was shocked to see Darius at the center, his face flushed with anger as he argued with Madison Grant. "You can't just decide who gets in and who doesn't," he was saying as Nima drew near. "My father is on the school board. He'll have all of you suspended. Go ahead and call him," Maddie replied, her arms crossed defiantly. "We've already spoken to Principal Chun. What you did to Nima violated the amended anti-bullying policy. Species-based harassment is grounds for expulsion." Darius laughed, though it sounded forced. "Expulsion? For a prank? You're delusional." "It wasn't a prank," came another voice, and Nima was surprised to see Tyler Grant step forward from the crowd. "It was repeated, targeted harassment of a student with a disability. And we have the security footage to prove it." Nima realized suddenly what was happening. The science club members, along with other students who had gradually become friendly toward her, were confronting Darius directly. They were standing up not just for her, but for the principle that all students, regardless of species or ability, deserved respect. Darius's gaze swept the crowd, clearly looking for supporters, but finding none. His usual friends were noticeably absent. Then his eyes landed on Nima, and his expression hardened. "This is all your fault," he spat. "You and your human pet turned everyone against me." Before anyone could respond, Ethan appeared beside Nima, his hand coming to rest protectively on her shoulder. "No one turned anyone against you, Darius," he said calmly. "You did that all by yourself." A murmur of agreement ran through the gathered students. Darius looked around one more time, seeming to realize for the first time that he had become the outsider, the one who didn't belong. Without another word, he pushed through the crowd and stormed into the building. As he disappeared, a cheer went up from the assembled students. Maddie approached Nima, her expression a mixture of triumph and concern. "Are you okay? We didn't mean to make a scene, but when we heard about what happened at the reception last night." "How did you hear about that?" Nima asked, bewildered. Riley stepped forward, looking slightly embarrassed. "My mom works for the Corps. She was at the reception and saw Ethan confront Ambassador Wells. Word spread pretty fast among the diplomatic families. And then Riley told us, and we decided enough was enough," Maddie continued. "Darius has been getting away with this stuff for too long, just because his dad has connections. So we organized a little, welcoming committee for him this morning." Nima was speechless. The idea that these humans, some of whom she barely knew, had banded together to defend her was almost incomprehensible from a Centaurian perspective, where conflict avoidance was deeply ingrained in the culture. "Thank you," she finally managed, her translator struggling to convey the depth of her emotion. "But you did not need to risk yourselves for me." Tyler grinned. "That's where you're wrong, Space Girl. That's exactly what we needed to do. Because that's what friends do here on Earth." Space Girl. The nickname should have been offensive, a reminder of her alienness. But the way Tyler said it, with affection rather than derision, transformed it into something else entirely. A term of endearment. A badge of belonging. Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. "Told you humans aren't all bad," he said quietly. "Just takes us a while sometimes to figure out what's right." The warning bell rang, and the crowd began to disperse, students heading to their first period classes. But Nima remained where she was for a moment, overwhelmed by a sensation she had never experienced before, a feeling of being not just accepted, but actively embraced by a community that had once seemed so hostile. In that moment, Nima understood something profound about humans. Their capacity for cruelty was matched only by their capacity for compassion. Their tendency toward tribalism could be overcome by their even stronger impulse toward justice. And while they might take longer than Centaurians to reach consensus, once they did, they acted with a passion and conviction that could change worlds. As she finally moved to join the stream of students entering the building, Nima caught sight of a familiar figure waiting by the door, Principal Chun, who nodded to her with what appeared to be genuine respect. "Miss Nima," the principal said as she approached. "A word, if I may." Nima braced herself, wondering if she was about to be reprimanded for the confrontation with Darius. "Yes, Principal Chun. I wanted to inform you that the school board met in emergency session last night, after certain information came to light regarding Ambassador Wells's conduct at the diplomatic reception. They have voted unanimously to expand our anti-bullying policy to include more severe consequences for repeated violations." Nima blinked in surprise. "That is good news." "Indeed," Principal Chin agreed. "They've also approved funding for additional accessibility modifications to the school facilities and for a more comprehensive interspecies cultural education program for all students and staff." The implications were clear. Ambassador Wells's attempt to silence her had backfired spectacularly, leading to greater protections and accommodations for non-human students rather than fewer. "Thank you for informing me," Nima said formally, unsure how else to respond. Principal Chin's expression softened slightly. "No, Miss Nima. Thank you. Your presence at our academy has been educational for all of us, myself included." With that, she moved away, leaving Nima to process this unexpected development. As she navigated her wheelchair through the now familiar hallways toward her first class, Nima found herself viewing the school with new eyes. The building that had once seemed so hostile and alien now felt, if not exactly like home, then at least like a place where she belonged. The students who passed her in the corridors were no longer faceless members of an incomprehensible species, but individuals with their own complexities and capacities for growth. And Ethan had become something she had never anticipated finding on Earth, a true friend, whose loyalty transcended species and politics, whose kindness had changed not just her life, but, potentially, the lives of future exchange students from across the galaxy. As she entered her classroom and took her usual place, Nima felt a sense of peace settle over her. Her mission on Earth was far from complete, and challenges undoubtedly still lay ahead. But for the first time, she faced them not with resignation, but with hope. Hope born from the day a human boy had found her stranded in a hallway and, without hesitation, had lifted her up and carried her forward. When the final bell rang at the end of the day, Nima found Ethan waiting for her outside her classroom, just as he had that first day. But this time, she was in her wheelchair, fully mobile and independent. "Hey," he said with a smile. "Ready to head home?" "Yes," Nima replied, returning his smile with one of her own. "I am ready." They moved together down the hallway, a Centaurian girl in a wheelchair and a human boy walking beside her, their differences obvious but somehow no longer defining. What defined them instead was the bond between them, a connection forged through adversity and strengthened by choice, a friendship that spanned worlds. As they exited the building into the bright afternoon sunlight, Nima paused, tilting her face up to feel the warmth on her blue skin. Earth's sun was different from Centauri's, stronger, more intense, but she was growing accustomed to its light, just as she was growing accustomed to so many aspects of this once alien world. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ethan asked, noticing her momentary stillness. Nima turned to look at him, this human boy who had changed everything with one simple act of kindness. "I was thinking," she said, her translator perfectly capturing the warmth in her voice, "that sometimes the heaviest things can be carried most easily when shared between friends." Ethan's eyes crinkled with understanding. "Yeah," he agreed softly. "That's kind of how it works around here." And as they continued their journey home, two beings from different worlds, moving forward together, Nima knew that whatever challenges the future held, she would never again have to face them alone. Not on this planet or any other. Not as long as there were humans like Ethan. 2 years later, Nima stood at the Academy's graduation podium, her wheelchair now adorned with the academic honors she'd earned as class valedictorian. The audience before her included not only her human classmates, but also her Centaurian parents, who had finally been able to visit Earth for this momentous occasion. When I first arrived at this school, she began, her translator converting her clicks to clear English, I believed I was merely enduring a diplomatic assignment. Today, I stand before you transformed, not despite my differences, but because we all learned to see beyond them. Her gaze found Ethan in the crowd, now her closest friend and the Academy's first recipient of the new Interspecies Relations Scholarship. Next to him sat Maddie, Riley, and the science club members who had become her tight-knit circle. Even Darius was present, his time in mandatory cultural sensitivity training having genuinely changed his perspective. The exchange program that brought me here has now expanded to 27 planets, she continued. Next semester, 10 new non-human students will join the Academy, each with their own wheelchairs, wings, or whatever they need, and each certain to find the same acceptance I eventually found. After the ceremony, as Ethan helped load her belongings into the diplomatic shuttle for her journey home, they shared a moment of quiet reflection. I'll be back for university in 3 months, Nima reminded him, her large eyes shimmering with unshed tears. And you'll visit Centauri next summer. Wouldn't miss it, Ethan replied with the easy smile that at first won her trust. Your parents promised to show me those bioluminescent forests. Ambassador Wells approached them, now the leading advocate for expanded interspecies education following his public change of heart. Miss Nima, your shuttle awaits. And Mr. Cole, Earth's diplomatic future looks brighter knowing you'll be joining the Corps after university. As Nima's shuttle lifted off, she watched Earth growing smaller below, no longer an alien world but a second home. Proof that when one human boy carried an alien girl to class, he didn't just change her life. He changed 2 worlds forever. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.